Hello, guys. Without further ado, let's get started.
Get the show on the road. All right, first one. I absolutely agree. I think that there is a huge misconception around how much, training you need to do for sports like that. And the reality is it's quite low, right? I think any of our athletes could go play a, 2-hour football game, and the last of my concerns would be their work capacity. Like that's not going to be the key performance indicator I'm most concerned about. It's probably the least of my concerns. Um, in jump training, we have something called, or just in general in training, there's something called like a max speed reserve. And basically, what that means is when you increase your top speed, running slower feels relatively easier because if I can run 12 meters per second, then running at eight every, you know, uh, whatever once every 40 seconds is going to be relatively easy. So I think that that's somewhat similar in vertical. If I asked Isaiah or Donovan to go out and jump 40 inches like every day, they could do it
You know,
without
you
hesitating.
know where I noticed that was watching Donovan play basketball yesterday. Donovan is not a basketball player whatsoever. He's literally a hockey player. And he just went out while hurt, going half effort, just on everybody. Like just ran through
It's
the lane, jumped
glorious.
off one, jumping 40 inches and just dunking everything. And his half effort is what people's max effort dreams are. And yeah, it's like a perfect example of that. I guess this would be called max vertical reserve.
Yeah, max vert reserve. If you have a 50-inch vertical, then jumping 38 in sand is probably not going to be very taxing. I've seen Isaiah do it a handful of times. Like he could jump, 38 inches all day long and he wouldn't have any issues. But if I start to increase that intensity up to 45, 46, that's whenever things are going to start to break down. To piggyback off that, would you still program eccentric overloads and RFD for beach volleyballs, considering it biases more force than velocity? I definitely agree with your comment about it biasing force. A lot of guys don't have a ton of run-in velocity. I think beach volleyball is more skill specific than output specific. I think it's almost one of those things where it's kind of like basketball. Like one of the strongest indicators of your success is going to be how tall are you and what's your skill like in the sport. Do you know how to time a block? Do you know how to time a set? Now, if you're going to be a smaller guy, then you're going to have to be more capable. So, in the latter half of that question, or I guess to respond to that question, I think that the shorter you are and the lower you jump, then the more you're going to need a demand for that. But you definitely need to be careful about implementing that in season. Even though you're on sand, jumping is still really, really high force. And even though the contacts are still relatively non-intense, you still have to take those into account. And volleyball players play way too much. So you probably have to take advantage of windows of opportunity. Like I would recommend a beach volleyball player maybe play like you could play every day, but you definitely shouldn't be hitting every day, or definitely not like max effort hitting. I would leave that mostly for competition. I don't think, there's much of a need to over practice that, I would assume. I think you probably have to find what that balance is for that athlete, and then you can kind of determine that. I have an issue in my power cleans where I move my hips before the end of the first pull that I'm trying to fix. When I see other people power clean, I notice that when the bar gets above the knee for them, they're able to keep their knees somewhat bent. But for me to get that same position, my legs have to be completely straight, and it feels hard for me to get that position, especially with heavier weight. I also noticed something similar. You should have almost a soft bend at the end of the first pull. I'd have to see a video, which you said you sent a video doing the first pull. Is there an issue with my setup? I'll look at this at the end. But generally, your shin should be vertical and you should have a soft bend in the knee. I actually really like looking at Klokov a lot of the time as a demo because he does a really good job. There's a couple
Okay.
other really good weightlifters that do this. If you're shorter, you've got very short legs, you probably will have more bend in your leg because to get out of the first pull, the bar needs to move like 8 inches versus, for someone like Isaiah and I, it might need to move a foot. And that means that we need to push our knees back further and to maintain the correct position. I spent a lot of time with weightlifters this past weekend too. My friends are pretty elite. One guy clean and jerks. Well, he snatches 122 kilos and clean and jerks like 150-ish or something like that at like 145, 150 pounds. So, we're talking about guys at 2x their body weight in a power clean or more. And, they're relatively more powerful. And, a female as well that's equally as powerful, which is insane. And, I talked with them and their weightlifting coach, Vance, who's one of my mentors, worked with tons of world-class weightlifters, one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in strength and conditioning. And he was basically saying, like, one of the biggest successors in because I was asking about the height thing. Somehow we ended up talking about catching vertically and how that's like one of the biggest indicators, but also that the leverages are going to change for taller versus shorter athletes. And that even though you have the potential for more torque, that when you are catching the bar, the fact that your knees are moving relatively farther away from the line of pull, which means like where the bar is traveling, uh, like basically gravity functioning on the mass of the bar, that force, that vector is going to be more disadvantageous for taller people than the benefit of them being tall is, right? So that's why you see super tall guys have a hard time squatting because, yeah, maybe, your tendon is in a 1 inch or 3 inches of a better position. Matter of the fact is your knees are moving like a foot further away than someone who's short. So take that into account, but we'll look at the video later. So, Eric Sisti, how many carbs would you recommend before a jump session? Ooh, that's a good question. I've played around with this a lot, and I was talking to Fabian about it quite a bit. 2 foot jumpers, I've noticed like to have a bit more. What we do as 1 foot jumpers generally is take in very high carb meals, generally 48 to 24 hours out, but you also want to weigh very little. So you have to be a little bit dehydrated coming into like really big sessions. And this is like perfect best case scenario. Most people do not do this, but I wouldn't necessarily think about it. Neil, if you can send it here, it'll be better, by the way, for videos, because sometimes WhatsApp doesn't send, like it doesn't work on our computers. So try to send it here if possible. So I generally wouldn't think about it as long as you're getting how I'd treat it is get your protein intake first. So 2 grams per kilogram. I would really minimize fat content as much as possible. You should be getting your fat content through that protein intake, typically in the form of dairy. You're going to get fats, cheese, oils. Whenever you cook your meats and things like that, you're probably going to get those in the form of olive oil, avocado, really high quality fats, fish if you eat fish. You generally don't want to seek taking in fat content unless you have like a dietary restriction or something like that. And then, or like, your vegetables are probably an avocado or olive oil. They're good oils. And then what you want to do is you want to fill the rest in with carbohydrates. So oftentimes, my first goal is what is the protein content that I can take in? So I know that if I weigh 180 pounds, I need about 180 grams of protein. So for me, if I intermittent fast, I know that almost all of my meals have to be fairly protein heavy. And then the carbohydrates I'll get in the form of, sometimes like the cereals will have carbohydrates. I'll take a high protein cereal. Those exist now. Also in the form of like milk with the cereal, there's going to be a decent amount of carbohydrates there, especially if you're taking in normal like 1% or skim, not fair life. And then I'll also supplement it, or not supplement, but I'll take in rice. I usually weigh on a scale. I'll just weigh rice. Fabian taught me how to do it perfectly. Rinse the rice like 3 times. It's 2-to-1 ratio water to the rice. I usually cook about 400 grams at once. It takes like 20 minutes. That's how I would recommend doing it. If you cereals are also a really easy way. So like Donovan loves Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Isaiah loves Fruity Pebbles. And what are your favorite cereals?
Honey bunches of oats.
Perfect. So there's another really easy way. That's probably what I would recommend. What are the benefits of clean pulls to power cleans? Is it okay if I throw in a few power cleans? I'm only assigned clean pulls. So clean pulls are really effective for increasing the strength in the first pull and maintaining positions as the bar gets heavier. A lot of the time, what you'll see when guys get really heavy in power cleans is they don't get the knees forward as well. They kind of fall out of position. The bar will pull them forward and they miss in front. So what clean pulls do is they allow you to learn how to pull with a super maximal power clean load. So it's always listed as a percentage of your power clean. That's why you always see like 110%, and that's of your power clean. Obviously, you can't do 110% of your clean pull because you wouldn't be able to lift it off the floor if it was truly that amount, or it wouldn't be a clean pull anymore. It'd be like a deadlift. And you want to try to maintain the positions and the integrity of the lift while you're doing it and not just default to really bad habits. How in the world do you guys manage and respond to so many? We have a full team. We've built up over the years, and it's a really good question. So when we started the business, we didn't have as many athletes. When I started in 2019, 2018, Isaiah wasn't a part of, it was just translating human performance. Isaiah was in school at the time. This actually would have been 2018. Actually, I lied, in the like late 2018, like Halloween time, maybe a little earlier. So I was leaving athletic lab, and I had been coached by Mike whenever I was in high school. So I knew about what the amount of time I had to spend was, and I knew what the expectation was as an athlete, as having been someone that did this when I was in high school, even before online training was really a thing. So the first thing you do is you have to set up a really good infrastructure. That means making sure all your programs are robust, making sure that you've seen a handful of different situations. And for us, that means basically seeing everything in the book, right? Since I've been doing this just mostly jump training since 2018, 7 years later, I've saved pretty much every single program that I've ever written, even if it was individualized. And I just put the name of that person and I know what every single program has. I have good notes to remind me if I don't, and where I can always, look at the program. So you have a lot of boilerplot programs, and we'll call them buckets. So I might have 200 different buckets, right? I just have to know which bucket that person needs to start in. And because everyone is doing the same goal oftentimes, which is to jump higher, you have specificity built in because specificity is the training needs to look like the thing we want to get better at. And then individuality is figuring out what individuals' weaknesses are and then also being able to identify injuries and how to work around those injuries. So we have a really good onboarding form that also allows us to identify those two things. So once we break that down, I then can identify what bucket I need to put them in. And then the training itself is usually set, but then that person comes in and says, like in calls like this, hey, there's X, Y, or Z thing going on. I've trained guys over the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years to be able to answer those questions, right? So someone like Phil, who's in this call, has been with us since 2019. Phil knows exactly how I want everything done because he's seen almost every single question in the book, and he could attest to that. Austin has been with us since 2000. He's the first athlete I ever coached, so he knows exactly how I want things done. Ben has been studying us since he was in high school. And now he's a doctor of physical therapy. So it's surrounding yourself with a really, really good team and then figuring out how you can expand with that team so that we can offload some of those responsibilities. They know exactly how we want things done. And then we can build upon the current business and system so that it is able to scale accordingly. Yeah, that's really how. Isaiah, you feel like I did a really good job answering that, huh?
That was a really good summary.
Thanks,
Yeah.
man. I'll look at the review at the end, Eric. Tips on throwing my own lobs. Where should I be looking when I lob it? So for me, this has always been a little bit difficult as a 1 foot jumper, as a 2 foot jumper. Uh, and okay, the higher you jump, the less of a concern this is. The better you are at dunking, the more of a concern it is, or the more technical the dunk, the more of a concern it is. So for Isaiah, he's done it so many times. It's just reps, and you treat it like Call of Duty, where you have the perk on that shows you where the grenade is going to go when you throw it. That's how you kind of view it in a sense. And then you always want to look at the ball into your hand and then you eye the rim. So generally, I'll look at the rim and then I know if it's an East Bay, hey, the ball has to be relatively low for me. I need it to be about at the bottom of the net. And I'm looking at the ball. And then when the ball's in the right spot, your approach is generally going to be better and you're going to jump higher. If the ball's in the wrong spot, it's generally going to dysregulate your approach and you're not going to attack the takeoff as much. You're going to jump lower and the attempt's going to be really bad. So if you're throwing your own lobs, it depends on what you're trying to do, but you need to say, okay, if it's a one-hander, I know the ball needs to be right above the rim, right? And I know that if the ball is right above the rim and it's just reps, right? I know that generally the ball needs to bounce 3 feet off the rim, right? And it depends on the ball, right? Like if your ball's super bouncy and you're outdoor, the lob's going to feel a little bit different. So you have to be an athlete. Isaiah's always said this to me. It's like shooting, right? You get a touch on the ball, start to understand how the ball needs to bounce, where it needs to be, and then it starts to get easier over time. One of the big things that I always messed up was not looking at the ball. I would approach the rim and attack the rim instead of attacking the ball because ultimately you need to have the ball in your hand if you're going to dunk, right? If you're really early on and you're just trying to get your first dunk and you're working with like someone throwing lobs, then they have to be fairly coordinated. And I always tell this to guys, like you have to work together. It's not just the person approaching the ball or the jumper, and it's not just the person lobbing it. Together, you guys have to be an athlete. That means you might have to slow down mid approach if you see that they're not lowering the ball at the right time, right? Or you might need to speed up. and then you need to communicate with them back and forth. So really, it's reps. Isaiah, do you have anything else you'd want to add to that?
Yeah. I can speak a lot from like personal experience. I used to be really bad at lobbing a ball, and I actually got to the point where I was comfortable doing one-handers off the dribble before I focused on lobs. And the the biggest thing I did was that summer, I told myself I wasn't gonna do a single dunk off the dribble. Everything had to be off the lob. And I learned like um it's literally like shooting a basketball. You can talk about shooting a basketball as much as you want. You can talk about the technique. You can watch people shoot a basketball. But at the end of the day, what's going to separate good shooters from bad shooters is how many shots have they taken. And just how I always say with jumping, if you were to plot a graph of the highest jumpers and on the y-axis you have how high they jump, x-axis how many jumps they've taken, there'd probably be a really strong correlation. You would see the same correlation with shooting a basketball, right? Best shooters, how many times have they shot? And you would probably see the same correlation with guys that are good at doing self lobs. The best guys are probably the ones that have just done the most self lobs. So there's no shortcut for practice. And I do agree with John. Look at the ball. If you guys want to see an exaggerated example of this, go watch some Guy Dupuis dunk sessions. He literally stares at the ball like he's gonna murder it. His eyes are wide open and he's just staring the ball down as it bounces down. He's looking at the ball into his hands and then he looks at the rim. So yeah.
Culprit lack of consistent sport, bringing down my caloric expenditure. I would be on a slight deficit. I think that's fine. I, Dex is good. I think Dex is amazing. If you, generally speaking, for what you're trying to do, you just need to be around 12 to 7%. You probably don't need to be much leaner than that. If you really want to be crazy explosive, lower is better. I'm I'm also trying to cut calories, as you guys have probably seen if you watched any of my YouTube videos. I think that's a very slight deficit and taking advantage of just like not tips and tricks, but like uh, personally, because I have to always manage my weight more so than Isaiah and Donovan, their expenditure is higher than mine for whatever reason. Uh, I intermittent fast, making a lot of lifestyle changes. We've talked about it in other YouTube videos, but controlling your environment. But yeah, lower, slower, losing weight is better. And it's always going to go up and down, but you want to see the trend week to week, month to month, kind of trend downward. Now, there will be exceptions to that, right? Like you could have a super high carbohydrate weekend, maybe you're out with your family or your friends in town and maybe you drink some alcohol or whatever. You're going to store a lot more water because carbohydrates and water is oftentimes what you're seeing change when you're looking at the scale change. So that's why you want to track it longitudinally because you're going to have all these fluctuations day to day. And a good example of this, Friday last week, I woke up at 177. This morning, I woke up and I was 182. The day before, I was 184. Did I lose 2 pounds in, one day or did I gain five? No, I ate more this weekend. I took in more carbohydrates. You store more water when you take in carbohydrates. My weight fluctuates 7 pounds or so because of the sodium as well. And then if I drink alcohol, I'm also going to store more water. On Monday morning, I was 184.5. That's 7 pound swing, 8 pound swing. By the next day, I'm down 2 pounds. Now I'm 182. But I was also dehydrated when I weighed 177. In reality, I'm probably between there. I'm between 184 and 177. And that's probably my actual weight. So I want to see that actual weight by looking at those numbers over time after I weigh myself in the morning go down generally. And it really comes down to just making consistent, good decisions. So, for example, for me, I know, hey, I can't have bad snacks in the house. I have to have high protein snacks. I have to not allow potato chips to be in the house, not allow pretzels to be in the house, to not allow candy to be in the house, ice cream, any of that stuff, because I know that if it's an option, I'm more likely to make a bad choice. Doesn't mean I will make a bad choice, but I'm more likely to make a bad choice if it's an option. So it starts at the grocery store. I go to the store and I know, hey, for dinner, I'm going to need a high protein meal. That's going to make me feel full. I'm going to cook a bunch of rice because that's also going to make me feel full. I enjoy eating those things and, making sure I take in more vegetables and things like that definitely helps. So, yeah, the goal body weight with a DEXA, like I said, for use probably around 8 to 12. Later, I've noticed I shorten my penultimate step when I dunked, when I go for height checks, when I dunk. Okay, so if you're shorting it on a dunk, you're probably too close to the ball when you're starting your penultimate step. So what's happening is the lob, or I mean, I guess it's depending on if you're off the dribble or not. You're probably losing speed. Anytime you add an external variable to a technical aspect, it's going to increase the complexity, it's going to increase the difficulty, and it's going to make it harder for you to sustain good technique. We call this contextual interference. So when you have, like, for example, a sprinter and he's doing you mix it up. You have them run with a sled, then you have them run with a slight incline, and then you have them do an acceleration from a belly start or from a 2 point or from a 3 point. If you mix that up a bunch of times and it's not just a block start that they're used to, odds are they're going to default to bad technique, right? So when you add a ball, that's a similar thing, right? You're adding a context where it's a little bit different and it's just enough different where it starts to disrupt your motor patterns and your coordination. And as a result, you're probably going to have more likely to have bad technique, but you want to do your best to try to have good technique. And so this is where the coaching and cueing comes in, because as a coach, I'd be like, okay, it's okay if it's not perfect when you have a ball in your hand, but you need to try to make it better with a ball in your hand. Now, when you're going out to perform, like let's say you do this for 2, 3 weeks, I'd say, okay, it's been 2, 3 weeks. There should be a noticeable difference. If there's not, then you either have to go back to the drawing board, try a different cue. Every cue has a different shelf life. And that's really the art of kind of coaching and being a better athlete, is how well you acquire new motor skills, new motor patterns. I was doing squats. I'm not feeling pain in my quad pull. I was doing squats yesterday, 4x6. What should I do next time? Well, if it feels too intense, you should go lighter and you should rest 48 hours between. That's what I would do. Timelines as far as quad pulls, less is more. Oftentimes, if it's not getting better, you need to do less, not more. Okay, if you haven't pulled your quad or it feels fine and your PFP is getting better, you need to keep doing that stuff every day. Um, it sounds like you need to PFP protocol. It's not getting better. Same thing. So for muscle pulls, do less. Less is more. If it's getting worse as you're doing something, you're doing too much. Just do less and it'll get better. Muscles generally recover on their own. And if they're not, you need to go to the doctor and get that checked out because that's not normal. Over. Oh, okay. This is a little excessive. You're locking it out after the first pull. Oh, this is okay. As a clean deadlift, this is fine. You probably can allow, like right here, you can allow your torso to start uprighting. You also might need to go a little bit wider with the, no, that looks fine. So you're just, get your hips down very slightly on the set position and make that change. I see what you're saying. You're maybe getting a little bit of hip slide, but it's really not bad, dude. I mean, honestly, this is pretty good. Like this is fine. I don't see anything wrong with this. As a clean deadlift or just working on the first pull, this is what I'd want to see, right? It looks like you're in a leg press. You're just pushing the knees back, bars coming up as a result. Your hips, your shoulders aren't dropping as you stand up. Maybe the one thing I'd say is pretend you're like a I always tell people like a Teletubby, right? Imagine you had a little TV on your shirt here, and as you were standing up, you kept that screen facing the same exact direction. Like there were people watching down here, and they're just watching your chest, right? You don't want it to go down and face downward because then you'd have to lay on the ground to watch it, right? Imagine you have a bunch of little, tiny little Smurfs over here watching the Teletubby screen. And if you don't want to come up too soon, you don't want to go down too soon during the first pull.
All right, Eric. So this first jump was amazing.
Oh
Really, really
shit.
good. Um, what I want you to do is always compare your other jumps to that jump. You want to basically copy it as much as possible. Like right here, you're barely dunking off two hands. The way you jumped here, you could be crushing that every single time. And the big differences that I see, you had a longer split on the penultimate on this jump, right? And I can see that just by seeing that back knee is, let me pause it right there. I would be able to draw a straight line from your knee and it's behind your glute. That's always kind of the point of reference where I see if someone's taking a big enough split on that penultimate. You're getting some airtime on that step while lowering, right? You're not jumping up. It's allowing you to reconfigure those last two steps so that they plant with a really fast rhythm. And then you're going straight up. All that horizontal. velocity, you just projected it straight up. When we look at this jump, you shorted it a tiny, tiny bit, and then you cover a lot of horizontal distance on the jump. So this jump had great potential. If you would have just gone straight up, probably planted your penultimate a little bit farther. And then let me look at your off the dribble. The dribble's decent. Doesn't look like you're lowering as much off the dribble. So look how much you lowered here. And there was a real, I think this one also had a really good angle. See how much you lower. Look how low you are here. All right. Your leg is like damn near below 90 degrees. Like if you look at the angle at the knee, and then if you look at it's a little tougher to see it, but off the dribble, you're definitely not that low. Your height check was really good as well. So just try to this jump shows me that you can have great technique on your jumps. And the cool thing about it is you can just compare yourself to yourself. So try to compare every jump you do to this jump right here because it was technically pretty freaking perfect. You're a bit externally rotated, but that's due to your hip anatomy, so I wouldn't even worry about that. Yeah, some great stuff here.
So just mimic that first dunk as much as possible. Okay, that
Yep.
helps.
That's something
Yeah.
I've always done. Like when
Okay.
I'm practicing trick dunks, for example,
Yeah.
I always would look at like I used to always jump my best and kind of still do. I would jump my best on height checks and windmills. So when I was learning how to do East Bays, I wanted to at toe off. So specifically because when trick dunk people try trick dunks, they mess this part up a lot. At toe off, I would try to mimic this position, right? Hands straight up, triple extension, hips extended. And then obviously the approach. And I wanted to every single jump to look just like that. And the best dunkers, like if you look at Kilgannon jumps with pretty much his max vertical on every single dunk, and that's what makes him so good. There's guys out there with higher verticals than Kilgannon, higher max touches, but they can't do the same dunks because they're not accessing their entire vertical. So that's what's going to set you apart. If you can get your technique off the dribble to look closer to this, right? Or when you do a one-hander off the backboard, if you can get it to look more like this, it's going to make every dunk way better. Like this is a high enough vertical to, windmill and 360 and tomahawk and that type of thing if you can just get that exact jump on every single jump.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I have the potential. I don't always maximize my dunks or my jumps. It's very rare that I get a perfect jump, but I feel like when I get it, it's
Yeah.
just hard to get it again, but it comes down to reps, of course, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I
I
always
think time.
this might help, but I compartmentalize the cues. So I almost have like a cue for my approach, and then once I'm in the air, a cue for catching the ball or dunking or putting in the hoop. So it's like it's almost like a dunk is like two things at once. It's like timing, it's like a perfect approach and then the trick dunk. And it's actually really similar to high jump in that sense. Like after having tried high jump for a month last month, it was the same thing. It was like you have your approach and you have to hit it perfect, but then once you're in the air, you have to hit good technique going over the bar. And dunking's really similar in that regard.
Watching this, I actually want to cue your head position. Couple things. The set position. So one, you're pushing off the back leg. So right here I can tell, right? Because that see how your right leg comes up and that back leg's extending, right? So that and then the right arm comes forward, right? So I can tell you're like doing something a little bit atypical. Here the left arm should be coming forward right away. So you're pushing off the back leg. I want you to keep 90% of your weight on that front leg, right? Almost so you can float your back leg off the ground. That will help your initial trajectory out. And then fixing that step will also help you in steps two, three, four, and five. So that's the first thing I want you to do. The second thing is I want you to put your opposite arm and opposite drive knee uh, in a position where they're going to be synchronized. So right now, you can see that again, you're pushing off the right leg, but your right hand's coming forward. Really, what's happening is you're pushing off the back leg. So I want you to, the leg that's forward, that same arm, I want you to put behind your body, right? But I want you to exaggerate it. So kind of keep it up by your head. And then as you push off of that front leg, I want you to swing like what you're doing right here. That should be the first action. So this, your set position should look more like this almost, right? So that the first thing you do is you swing that left arm forward as your right knee comes forward, right? So keep the weight on the left leg a bunch, right? And then swing that left arm forward super aggressively as you drive the knee forward. Okay, that'll help quite a bit. So you're actually not in bad position here. The second thing I would cue is I want you to look probably 10 feet out in front of you. So kind of keep your chin tucked a little bit. Your head is up a little too much and it's causing you to just upright really, really quickly. So like right here, you're where I would expect someone to be 10 yards down the track, right? And this is also related to rate of force development. So let's just work on those first three strides because once those are the bigger issues. And so the rest of the run is kind of cooked after that. Once you're upright here, I mean, you're really just cutting down, getting the feet down really, really quick. I don't want to focus on that too much. I want to focus on accelerating because you have to accelerate before you're upright. So mastering acceleration is really important. That's why we practice it so much. So I want you to keep the weight on the front foot. I want you to drive and throw that left arm forward as you drive your right knee forward super aggressively. I call it like a big split. Almost feels like a penultimate step. And then I want you to keep your head tucked or your chin tucked a little bit as you push out. That'll help you project outward and it'll set you up for a really, really good acceleration. So work on that next week and we'll just focus on those first, that just the initial push off because that'll help the rest of the run. All right. And then let's go to Maxim. So Maxim, you are rushing your acceleration. And I hope I can find this video. Where is it at? Okay. So you are rushing your acceleration. And I can tell because the displacement of each stride is quite small. I know you're a really tall guy, so I'm just going to watch this in full speed a few times. And I'll let you just watch it. So that's really what we call choppy. We call that really choppy. Once you're upright, I call it tapping. So a lot of elite sprinters, when they get upright, right about here, right, in a normal elite sprinter, you would see them really start to increase their frequency, right? It almost is like a snare drum, okay? And when you're at that phase in the run, you've generated a lot of momentum, and your goal is to actually not decelerate. So your ground contact times are really, really quickly. You're trying to balance and stay in this upright position. You're generating the requisite horizontal momentum and requisite ground reaction forces, horizontal ground reaction forces during the run that allow you to maintain that top speed. That doesn't really happen until 20 to 30 meters down the track. What a lot of guys are doing is they're accelerating super aggressively from step 0 all the way through like step 15 to probably 20, depending on how fast you are. So for you, I can tell that you're just trying to get your feet down really, really quick, right? So when I watch this, you're not displacing very far. You're just getting the feet down really quick like a snare drum. So what I want you to do is don't think about a snare drum and or like jabbing at you think about a boxer hitting one of the bags that they just go with their hands. It's not about little touches on the bag, right? It's about big pushes early on, and that's how you generate momentum. So if you watch Donovan and I yesterday, Donovan is faster. He's unequivocally way faster. He's very, very high rate of force development. So he's more explosive, and that's going to give him more opportunity to have bigger pushes early on in a sprint. He's going to have more horizontal force directions because he can generate vertical forces faster and balance better, and he can also generate more horizontal force faster. So for me, I have to generate force by being very, very efficient with each touchdown. I have to make sure my foot is directly under my hips and I'm pushing as aggressively as I possibly can to generate momentum. And that's really what it's about. It's not about the stride frequency. You want to have a balance, but right now you're doing a ladder drill. I want you to think about treating it more like a bound each stride. Not a bound, but more like a bound, displacing as far as you can on each of those strides while still maintaining a reasonable stride frequency. So right now your stride frequency is a 10 out of 10. I want you to dial it down to like a 7 out of 10, and I want you to dial up, and your pushing is like a 4 out of 10. I want you to dial up the pushing up to a 7 out of 10. If a 10 out of 10 is bounding for distance, right now you're at like and a one is a ladder drill, you need to find a balance there. So push out, push down the track. It's going to feel slower actually initially, but then as you do it over time, you'll notice, oh wow, I have a lot more momentum at the end of my acceleration. And that's how you can really tell. It's going to take you 20 yards to slow down, but it's going to feel slower out of the back, right? Very normal. That's what we is very counterintuitive for a lot of people. Javid Best, when I was at Altus, he really struggled with that initially because he's a football player, and those guys want to have their foot always in contact with the ground so they can change direction. But over time, that leads to bad habits if your only goal is to run really, really fast or rate of force development or jump training in our case. You're still getting really good adaptation out of it, but and your 3 points that was better because you're in a lower position, you're kind of forced to push out a little bit more. But that would be my big cue for you. And then here, these are great. I don't see anything wrong with this. This is perfect. Maybe no, this is fine. This is fine. Maybe could stand to push the front knee forward a little bit, but I'm totally okay with this. I think this is really good. No cues there. Just gonna watch this through a couple times. I haven't seen it yet. Okay, really truncated. I'm just gonna keep watching it through. I wish it would just I like the galloping. I like the acceleration. I think that's really good. You got like a good rhythm and stuff like that. You need to plant that penultimate step further back. Yeah, it's just too close. And you need to drive the knee harder. So right here, I need you to plant this like a foot further back, maybe 2 feet further back. And then I need you to drive this knee. See how you're not driving your knee? Like this is, if this were a sprint, I'd be like, dude, that looks like Garbo, right? That's like really, really not aggressive. I want you to drive this knee like you were doing the first stride of a sprint. Like I was telling those guys, you want to push, right? Get a big split, push, drive the knee. That's what you need to do here during the penultimate step, right? You're just rolling through it and it's allowing you to stay really low and you're maintaining momentum and you have good rhythm, but you're not getting any acceleration out of this. And that's going to make it really hard for you to maximize your jump, right? You're basically being relaxed and lazy at the end of the jump when this is the most aggressive stride, right? Like push, 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 boom, right here, you're just rolling through it. And you're trying to push here and generate all the momentum here, when in reality, you're not going to be able to use a good stretch shortening cycle because you didn't get enough speed and momentum here. And that's really what's going to take you to that next level. You're getting the feet down really, really quickly. Everything else is good. But right here, it is drive that knee as hard as you possibly can. Like you're going to knee a hole through a concrete wall. That is the cue I'm going to give you. And then let's go to your other one. I'm going to play this through a couple times.
Who's this?
This is the same one, Eduardo.
Okay, bet.
Watch this through a couple times here. Should have made that, honestly. You were a really good jumper off one. This is like pretty freaking impressive. I mean, honestly, you're doing a lot of things really, really well, right? You're accelerating into it. You've actually got really good rhythm. Your positions are solid. It looks like you just need to rep this out a little bit more, honestly. If anything, I would say maybe you're very fluid and almost like slow and just relying on a lot of power. So what will happen as you start to run faster is this position, you'll start to lean back a bit and you're still in pretty good position, but especially off the dribble, like this is pretty solid. It's just slow. It's maybe a little bit slow. So I would say just try to cue driving the ball and knee more aggressively forward and upwards. There's really not much wrong with this. I mean, this is good. You're actually accelerating through that long position. If anything, I'd say momentum. Momentum is really what you need to add, and the rhythm will pick up as you add more momentum. So it's being more aggressive, adding a bit more momentum, attacking it more, and that's going to happen just through reps. Outside of that, it looks pretty freaking good. I don't want to over cue it because one foot is a delicate flower, right? It's like the jejunum. Okay, you upset the jejunum, you're going to puke. I learned that in college. Isaiah, you got the next one.
Yeah. All right, some yamaroos. Love yams. Boom. Oh,
Left, right, lefty. I like that.
the chat was covering the dunk, so I didn't see it. Not bad. Not bad at all. I think I remember you. You were the guy that was running too fast. And this looks way better. You're now not running too fast, I don't think. Let's see if you yep, you're planning this is way better than last time. Planning pretty well under your center of mass. Definitely got to take that penultimate, plant the support leg a little bit farther. You look like a pretty tall guy. You look like you're like what, 6'1", I would guess. Probably should be planting like right here. And then like I was t telling Eric Sisti, I believe, I want to see that knee be behind the butt. Right now it's in line with your butt. I want you to extend that foot a little bit more, which is going to happen by planting here. And then I still want you to plant here. So take your penultimate here, finish here. Keep everything else the same. You're lowering really well. You're not planting in front of your center of mass anymore. You're accelerating through your last two steps. Really good stuff here.
You're gonna get some very in the Doc Martens. That's crazy. Oh, not bad. Okay, so low back is just rounding a bit here. Bar's heavy off the floor. So you need to keep your knees forward a bit over I would say push your knees over the toe a little bit in the set position. Get your hips down and really tighten, cinch down that low back. I tell guys, put your shoulder blades in your back pocket. Oh, nicely done on the catch. Really nicely done. Beautifully done on the catch. Okay, so here, I mean, this is what happens when the bar gets heavy. You do a really good job of getting underneath it, actually. I mean, this is pretty freaking good. I would say the first pull is the biggest thing. Clean pulls are really going to go a long way for you. I would say that you need to jump more aggressively with the bar. So when you're doing clean pulls and you get to right here, I want you to push through that ground with your legs as hard as you possibly can. Try to jump like you were doing a barbell squat jump and you were going to hit your head on the roof. That would be the cue I would give you. Light. Okay, so you were doing this like an Olympic weightlifter. You're not letting the knees come forward at all. You're catching super vertical. This is really good if you're gonna do like Olympic weightlifting. This is like what Oli lifter coaches would probably love. I like to see the knees come forward more here. So let the knees come forward after you get here. Let the knees come forward under the bar and let your chest come up right a little bit further before you fully extend, right? So let the shoulders come back a little bit a little bit more. Let the knees come forward a little bit more before you jump. That'll give you more impulse. You can tell your head's forward. You're completely vertical. You generally want to see a slight backward lean at really high loads, especially as a strength power athlete. Really want to see that. Let me see if the other one's a little bit heavier. Yeah, same thing. So you can see now you're really starting to short it, right? You're not even getting fully tall. You should be leaning backward here at the end of the second pull. You're not because we call that shorting it. And that means you're not generating peak power. You're actually not getting the hip involved as much as you need to. The more you kind of lean back, if you were to squeeze your butt standing upright, your hips move forward. That's what should happen at the end of the second pull, triple extension. So we need to let the knees come forward, kind of saddle up is what I call it, like you're sitting on a horse and extend out of that position. You're not quite hitting that, what we would call like the power position. You can look up videos of like the end of the double knee bend and you'll see a lot of guys. And after this, we got a boogie. But so this is a super heavy clean. So this is definitely going to be the absolute exception, where you're getting guys who, but I want you to watch how on the first pull, and you guys all can kind of watch this, but he has a really vertical set position, and then he kind of actually he does a really good job. It's kind of crazy. So pushing the knees back, look, they're completely vertical. As he passes the knee, watch what the knees do. They come right here, they're going to come forward. Look, knees come forward, shoulders come back. 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 Now this is pretty much the most powerful position. If you were to test from here to here, this is where he's getting peak wattage. This is where you're getting insane forces on the bar. You can start to see the bar bend a lot right through this position. That's because that's where he's getting it. So he kind of really extends the hip, but you can see, right? He's finishing with his shoulders behind his heels. He doesn't even get full extension at the knee because it's so heavy, but you're not at that point. You're not cleaning, no offense, you're not cleaning damn near 500 pounds. He has power. He's cleaned 500 pounds. But look at this pull. I mean, holy hell.
He's such a monster, bro.
He could have caught that higher. and then just stands that up like an absolute unit. What a freak. Love that guy. So yeah, that's the call, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was really useful, and we'll see you guys next week. Ciao.
But